In this final episode, all the goblins in the altar area have been killed. The priestess girl quickly approached the helpless younger brother of the king. She also finally found the precious chainmail for him. The priestess girl hugged the king's younger brother, grateful that he was okay. The king's younger brother was still in shock from everything that happened and began to cry. Lizardman also noticed that Goblin Slayer seemed relieved. However, Lizardman mentioned a symbol on the altar. He didn't fully understand it, but it seemed the goblins wanted to awaken an evil god. Meanwhile, the elf seemed eager to return home since they had saved the king's younger brother. However, Goblin Slayer mentioned that there were still goblins on the upper floor. All goblins must be killed without exception. At that moment, unbeknownst to them, the goblin priest was still alive and tried to reach for his staff. He then sacrificed himself to summon a massive hand. That hand was the greater demon's hand. The hand instantly released a frosty magic that enveloped the entire altar room. Seeing the priestess girl being thrown back due to the strong cold wind, Lizardman sacrificed himself by covering the priestess girl with his large body. Goblin Slayer then approached them and told the others to gather around. They would create a wall of snow with the help of the dwarf's magic. The wall was helpful in blocking the extremely cold wind. While they had time, the priestess girl asked for a stamina potion for all of them. The dwarf also offered his alcohol to keep their bodies warm. After that, the elf climbed the wall to check the condition of the greater demon's hand. From her observation, it seemed the hand couldn't reach them. Goblin Slayer thought they should retreat. After all, their mission was accomplished. Moreover, the king's younger brother and Lizardman were starting to weaken. Just as they were considering this, the greater demon's hand suddenly advanced, smashing their wall. Goblin Slayer didn't expect the hand to move. At this point, they had no choice but to fight. Fortunately, Goblin Slayer stated that he had a plan. The priestess girl lured the hand by throwing a rock. When it was lured, Goblin Slayer poured flammable oil, a liquid that ignites easily. Unfortunately, he couldn't burn the hand right now because the room's temperature was too cold. Meanwhile, the priestess girl continued to open the elevator door in the room. She used the cloth given by the sword maiden to do so. Goblin Slayer then threw his rope and hook to pull the greater demon's hand. However, the hand resisted. The hand then prepared to release its frosty magic once again. At that moment, the dwarf, Lizardman, and elf decided to work together to counter it. The dwarf warmed up Lizardman's body so he could use magic to create a weapon. With that weapon, the elf would shoot it using her bow. The elf struggled to draw the weapon with her mouth and legs, as her hands alone wouldn't be strong enough. After that, the weapon hit the greater demon's hand, preventing it from activating the frosty magic. With that, Goblin Slayer could now pull and throw it towards the elevator. The hand fell because there was no lift inside. However, the hand still managed to hold on with its claws to avoid falling. As the hand tried to climb back up, the priestess girl used her miracle of protection to block the path upward. Not giving up, the greater demon's hand aggressively attacked the protection to break it. The priestess girl tried her best to maintain the protection. Until finally, the priestess girl managed to hold her protection just in time as the elevator began to rise. With that, the greater demon's hand got caught between the lift and the protection. Goblin Slayer and the others can now proceed upstairs. They decide to finish off the remaining goblins on the upper floor. The ones tasked with fighting are Goblin Slayer, the elf, and the priestess girl. Lizardman is too weak to fight, and Dwarf is tasked with carrying the king's younger brother. At that moment, the priestess girl sees the king's younger brother regretting his actions. She feels he's just like her half a year ago, clueless, innocent, and naive. They continue to the upper floor until they reach the exit gate of the labyrinth. Unexpectedly, they are greeted by hundreds of goblins. It's understandable as the greater demon's hand caused quite a commotion. Without that hand, they wouldn't have been detected. Ironically, now they seem to be the ones being hunted. Lizardman then decides he wants to join the fight, saying he's prepared to die standing tall. The others ask if Goblin Slayer has a plan. Seeing the situation, Goblin Slayer recalls that the country won't act solely based on this issue. They also don't care if someone's family is abducted by goblins. This is the harsh reality of goblin extermination. Nevertheless, someone has to do it. The priestess girl trembles a bit and holds Goblin Slayer's hand. Just as they prepare to face the hundreds of goblins, a fierce lightning bolt strikes most of the goblins there. It turns out the lightning was a spell cast by Sword Maiden. She arrives there with some troops. However, even after unleashing the spell on the goblins, Sword Maiden still looks shaken. The priestess girl slowly releases her grip on Goblin Slayer's hand. Witnessing this, she feels she wants to help Goblin Slayer in the future, not just rely on him. Meanwhile, in the capital, two individuals are revealed to be the masterminds behind all these incidents. One is a nobleman, and the other is a mysterious witch. The witch manipulated the goblins using the power of the Skyfire Stone and abducted the king's younger brother. He intends to sacrifice him to awaken a demon, to unite the demon with a visitor from a distant star, creating something dreadful. Even if their plan fails, spreading rumors of the king's younger brother's defilement could disrupt his marriage. The lineage's power would fade, tarnishing the king's authority. After that, the palace's balance would collapse. It seems the nobleman doesn't really like the king. He disapproves of the king's past, where he adventured recklessly and then took power in the land. While discussing these plans, the witch recalls an annoying adventurer who was once widely talked about. Now, that adventurer's whereabouts are unknown. The nobleman doesn't really believe in the rumor about the justice-seeking adventurer. He claims it's just common folk gossip. As they discuss this, suddenly the wall behind them shatters. From there emerges someone in very shiny armor. Because of this armor, the adventurer is dubbed the Knight of Diamond. This is the justice-seeking adventurer the nobleman mentioned earlier. The nobleman finds Knight of Diamond's actions disrespectful, especially since he's a noble. He orders Knight of Diamond to remove his helmet. Knight of Diamond says he'll regret seeing his face. However, he happily reveals his face. Both the witch and the nobleman are shocked to see it. As it turns out, the person behind the Knight of Diamond is the ruler of the land. Goblin Slayer and the others have returned from the capital. In the guild, the elf is seen complaining to the priestess girl and the receptionist because their group decided not to accept a reward. What the elf means is that they didn't take the reward for defeating the greater demon's hand. They only took the share for exterminating goblins. Of course, it was Goblin Slayer who did that. The receptionist already understands that Goblin Slayer is like that. Even though they saved the kidnapped noble daughter, Goblin Slayer still prioritizes goblin extermination. During their conversation, the priestess girl seems lost in thought. When asked, it turns out she's pondering why becoming strong feels so difficult. The elf replies that even trees can't grow in an instant. The receptionist adds that rushing to achieve strength is not beneficial. In fact, gaining experience through training and solo expeditions isn't a good approach either. The receptionist then shares some uplifting news to motivate the priestess girl. Apparently, the king's younger brother has devoted himself to Mother Earth. He did so after meeting the Earth Mother's priestess, which of course is the priestess girl. The king's younger brother is unsure about his future aspirations, but he wants to become like that priestess someday. Tears start to flow as the priestess girl hears this. She never expected her actions could also help others towards a positive path. As the day grows late, Goblin Slayer heads to the farm after returning from the capital. After all the recent events, Goblin Slayer feels that not much has changed. He receives a mission, goes to the location, kills goblins, rescues prisoners, and then returns. That's all there is to it. However, that's his duty. There's no end to this journey. Goblin Slayer understands he can't become like Sword Maiden, Noble Fencer, and the Priestess Girl. Although he's unsure about his direction, he knows the steps to take. That's the only choice he has. On his journey, Goblin Slayer is greeted by the farm girl. She spots Goblin Slayer from the window and decides to meet him outside. concerned seeing Goblin Slayer wandering around late at night like this, and so Goblin Slayer returns home to the farm as if nothing has changed. He will continue to kill goblins because that's the path he has chosen.